Nicholas Marino. You have your own library. Nicholas Marino.
Marino.
So like you can search whatever song you want to search in your library. You can search in your library and play it. Or you can just play a shuffle.
Yeah. Well, I'm just putting these in my notes and
My dad told me she's talking about Monday. Oh, well, seriously, Dad? He said that it helped him tremendously. My dad? I told him to say something. Oh, his doctor gave him the what for. The what for on Monday. He calls me, he's like, Jennifer, I need you to stop by the house. I need you to remove all of the cookies, all the sweets, these ribs. I need these gone from my house now. I said, what? His doctors have told him 50 times. But now, he was pre-diabetic before. Now they've diagnosed him diabetic, and he's got to go on meds for being diabetic. And I said, being stubborn, but my dad's the same way. he didn't want to have to learn the shots or nothing. I said, Dad, did you talk to him about Brinjolo? He said, I sure did, and they gave me a prescription. I said, well, you better start listening.
it works wonders.
I'm not a sweet eater, so I don't know, but
Me neither. I was a
if you're
sucker.
diabetic, I would think that Little Debbie's are not.
When I finished my pint of ice cream last night, I might go to sleep. I ate a whole pint of ice cream last night.
Hey, that's a good dinner. That's a good dinner.
I ate a
Ain't
whole
nothing
bag
wrong
of
with ice
little
cream.
white donuts.
You say it's not, but
Like
we have
not
no
at all.
diabetic. Okay,
Just
since he got
picture
the-
one
he's got a
kid,
port.
you got the white.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, so like Jeff said, when they're diabetic and it's mental in them that they're not supposed to have it, they crave it so
He
much.
doesn't eat port. He thinks I have the port, so.
You know, I've been
okay,
eating
it's like his
salads and
portable
That's
food.
what I
I
told
guess I've
Alan,
been
cause you know Alan's
splurging
diabetic.
at home
I'm like,
or
honey, you
something.
realize that
Cause
if
I
you
got on
want
the
to
scale this
do away
morning.
with this, and he,
I don't
and
know,
I
but
think this now has gotten to him,
because I
cause
quit
his
drinking
aunt,
beer.
the one that just passed,
I drink like
that
one beer a day
went to the
and that's
funeral the
it.
other day, she was
Where it
diabetic.
used to be
She
several.
died. Her toes amputated first, then
But I
this,
lost
then
weight
this, and
because I wasn't
her
eating dinner.
kidneys had shut
Now I'm
down.
eating dinner every night.
So she was on dialysis.
And,
And I said,
you know, in a bag of
and
little
so I
Debbie
think it's
donuts,
getting to him a little bit now.
you know.
That replaced
My
your
dad
beer.
is
And then last
terrible,
night,
he
I
loves
think I
Debbie
had
cakes and everything like that. I have one.
7 or 8 homemade chocolate chip cookies.
He still does it.
I guess that's doing it. Oh, plus that cheesecake I had after lunch. After I ate a salad.
The good salad.
Yeah, I ate the good salad and had a big old bowl of cheesecake. So I got on the scales. I said, no wonder my pants are getting tight.
I don't wanna talk about that. Alan has lost, like he said, 250 now. And I'm like, good job, honey. I was like, yeah, well, I lost it all and it just came right on over to
And
me.
you
It's like it
found it,
migrated across the bed while we were sleeping.
I know, I heard him telling somebody on the phone, he said, I don't know if I like my wife being allowed to do medicine. He said, I'm about to starve on it. Because, you know, I come home, he goes, well, you thinking about dinner? And I'm like, I'm not thinking about anything.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I gotta eat, I gotta eat something. I'm like, well.
Ms. Kent, County Contractor Competency Board is in session for August the 2nd, 2023. Madam Secretary, would you read the rules?
Yes, sir. Chair, could you please turn on your mic as well? Please silence all cell phones. If you wish to speak, please let the board secretary know in advance. Otherwise, raise your hand for the board chair to recognize your request. When the chairman calls you to speak, come to the podium, adjust the microphone, then state your name and address for the record. You are requested to keep your remarks brief and factual. Both parties of an issue will be granted uniform maximum time to speak, which usually runs between 3 to 5 minutes. This hearing is considered quasi-judicial. Conduct is formal, and profane or derogatory comments will not be tolerated.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, do we have a quorum?
Yes, sir. Chair, with 6 members present, we do.
Very good. We have proof of publication of notification of this meeting.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, it was published July 27th, 2023 in the Escambia County Sun Press.
Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July the 12th, 2023. Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any comments? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Being none, the motion to approve the minutes of July the 12th, 2023 is approved. This time, we have a public forum. It's an opportunity for the general public to come before the board on any subject that's not on the agenda.
I believe that all members in the audience are here for the agenda items.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move now to the board secretary status report.
At this time, Chair, I would like to request an add-on for our contractor applications section. This application is for reinstatement of delinquent license Keith Albert Clarkson. He came in just after the agenda went out, so we're requesting an add-on.
Move approval.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any comments? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Being none, the motion to approve the add-on of Albert Clarkson, is approved. At this time, we moved into contractor applications. Item 7.1.
Mr. Chairman, we have applicant Skylar Starren. Mr. Starren, please step forward to the podium and state your first and last name and address for the record.
It does not appear that Mr. Starren is in the audience.
Our next applicant is Dalton Payne. Mr. Payne, please step forward to the podium.
You gotta go ahead and go through with Mr. Starren.
Oh,
We-
Hang on, Mr. Payne, just a second.
okay, it doesn't appear that he is here today.
Okay, what's the staff's recommendation?
We recommend approval for residential contractor examination.
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I had a question I was gonna ask him. Seemed like his experience was as a framer and running a framing crew based on the California license I looked up from his application. The contractor's license that they had, I think it was a Class B, I could be wrong, but it seemed like that was, it was like a framer thing. So, my curiosity was, did he run a framing crew, or has he actually been involved in the full construction? You know, his experience level and all that, yeah, there's the license, Class B. And if you read it, the details of what it goes down a little bit further, yeah, somewhere right there. The next page, I believe it is, says it can, under A, framing or carpentry project or self-performing the work, can do for two unrelated trades. Framing carpentry cannot count as the roles. And you can enter as a prime or subcontract for a single trade. So I'm just, that's a big step from running a framing crew to being taking the building license. Has he got any experience of actual complete construction? That was my big question, biggest question.
Any other comments? Yeah, what?
This is what the applicant provided in regard to a descriptive of what the license that he holds is. If you would like to have him present to talk about it, you can always defer this until our next meeting.
If you want to defer it, make a motion.
I need to withdraw mine. I'll let it die.
He's withdrawn his motion to approve.
It's up to you guys. I'm not trying to be the hardcore, but
No,
I
it's- I mean,
just would
it's
like to know, you know, coming from a framer to an actual complete building, it's a fairly big step.
Well, if you've got concerns, I don't have a problem with
Me either.
getting him to come.
I'll make a motion to defer to the next meeting.
Motion's made to defer the application for, examination for Skylar Starkin.
Second.
Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, like sign. Being none, a motion to delay the application for approval of the application for examination for Skylar Starrin is approved.
Our next applicant is Dalton Payne. Mr. Payne, please step forward to the podium and state your first, last name, and your address for the record.
Good morning. I need to pull this thing up. Apologize. Dalton Payne. Address is 342 Ridgewood Drive, Daphne, Alabama.
After reviewing his application, we recommend that he be approved for the doors, window, and siding examinations.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Being none, the application for the motion to approve the application for examination for Dalton Payne is approved. Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Thank you.
And don't come back to see us.
I'm gonna try not to, sir. Thank you. Want to stay for the duration of the
You don't have to.
Now we go to the addition.
Okay, our next applicant will be Mr. Keith Clarkson. He is our add-on. Mr. Clarkson, please step forward to the podium and state your first and last name and address for the record.
My name's Keith Clarkson, 12 Shoreline Place, Gulf Breeze, Florida.
Mr. Clarkson is coming before the board to reinstate his delinquent license. It has fallen delinquent on a local level for the past 17 years. He has remained on an inactive current status with the state and has maintained his continued education courses. Out of the $1537.50 delinquent fees, he has paid $150 to bring his application in front of the board again, and now has a new balance of $1387.50.
Mr. Clarkson, if you will go ahead and explain to the board the reason for your delinquency.
Sure. So I got my license at the county here in 2001, and then shortly after, I got my state license. And then I got hired on with Adams Homes, was promoted and moved down to Polk County in Lakeland, Florida, and I became a general manager there and was down there for 22 years, and I just recently retired and moved home, and so now I'm ready to start the next chapter, and I wanted to get my license back so I can start working locally again.
Any questions? Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Are there any discussion? I think we should add into the approval that he would be approved upon receipt of his payment of all of his fees.
That's correct, sir.
So you want to amend to
Yeah.
approval of
The application for
the application for examination subject to,
a reinstatement. This is a reinstatement.
yeah, reinstatement, subject to paying off past due fees.
Is there any further discussion?
Need a second.
I need a second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Being none, the motion to approve the reinstatement of Albert Clarkson, subject to payment of all fees, is approved.
Thanks, sir. And you won't see me again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I figured I wouldn't if you were with Adams Homes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Now we move to item 8.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This item is Wade Hunter doing business as Lee Hunter Construction LLC. State registered license number RR 282812171. Contractor Competency Board complaint number 230555 COM. It's in regard to Jonathan and Samantha Kendrick, the homeowner complainants at 1620 East Lee Street, Pensacola, Florida 32503. Hang on just a moment, please. Proper notice was sent to the respondent. The complainant is joining us via Microsoft Teams. Mr. and Ms. Kendrick, are you present?
Yes, myself and my wife.
Perfect. And are you going to provide testimony today?
Yes, we'll both swear in, and I guess my wife will be the primary speaker.
Perfect. And is the respondent present, Mr. Wade Hunter? And are you going to provide testimony today? At this time, I want to have everybody sworn in, please, and along with our investigator, Ms. Reber.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
I didn't hear anything.
Mr. and Ms. Kendrick?
Yeah, we can't hear you on that mic, so I'm going to go ahead and say yes.
Yes. Thank you. As you recall, that this matter was continued from our last meeting. The board gave us some direction that they would like to hear from the city in regard to the complaint. Mr. Bilby was unfortunately not able to make it today. However, he did provide Melissa with an email. I'm going to have Melissa go ahead and read that into the record.
Mr. Bill B. provided an email stating, "I do not have any direct knowledge of the slab size. The slab was passed by our inspector, but I have not visited the site. I'm not sure I can answer that question without going to the site. I discussed with the inspector who inspected it, and he would need to revisit the site to confirm as well." And that was received yesterday.
Would you review the actual complaint?
Yes, sir. At this time, I'm going to bring up the investigative report. At the previous probable cause hearing, Ms. Reber cited Code Section 1837 D9H, failure to supervise construction activities, as a possible code violation. Melissa, if you want to speak further on that.
What kind of my investigation revealed is like Mr. Bilby said, the slab inspection did pass. This sort of relates around also to a plumbing inspection. The plumbing rough was missed, and it's my understanding that Mr. Hunter was in the process of having the plumber change the pipes around when he was terminated from the project. The slab incident, I'll let Mr. Hunter speak to that, but that's about all I could determine there. I don't believe, I don't know how it came about that it was determined that the slab was the wrong size. Mr. Hunter's going to have to elaborate on that. I think he was in the process of trying to work on that as well, as my understanding, when he was terminated.
Chair, both parties are present if you'd like to hear from them.
I'd like to hear from
The Kendricks.
the Kendricks first.
Mr. and Ms. Kendrick?
Yeah, so, and I'm actually looking, I know that we've provided all of this information to Melissa, but from the city of Pensacola, we received the plans that were submitted for permitting. We never personally received these from Lee Hunter. They came from the city after the fact. The drawings that were provided to us were for a slab that should have been somewhere in the range of like 32 feet by 18 feet, I believe. Please don't quote me on this because I'm not looking at the drawings exactly. What was expected and what we were supposed to get should have matched the dimensions of the actual property, which were somewhere in the 24 by 18 range. What we got ended up being about 18 by 18. So we're talking about really three different things: what we expected and what should have been there, what was submitted to the city for permitting, and then what was actually built. So regardless of any plumbing or anything, you're talking about a lot of square footage that's missing, a lot. And he had no intention on fixing that. I'm not sure he even mentioned to us the size that was submitted to the city.
All right. Any questions of the Kendricks?
I mean, I don't have any questions really, other than the fact that I'm not quite sure why the city hasn't also provided those drawings back to you. Because they provided them pretty easily to us.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for the Kendricks. When the contract was signed, was there any dimensions given to that, or did you? I guess the question would be: was there details to saying the size in the contract? Was that expectations?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure there was 22 by 20 in the contract. I think what got built was like 20 by 18 or something to that effect. Like if you go look at that house, I mean, imagine standing at the backside of a house, you're putting on a master suite edition. Imagine looking at it and then being short 2 feet on both sides of that house, right? So like, it doesn't take a genius to realize what happened here, right? So that's what caused this whole thing to spark, right? And then I happen to have someone that lives in the area of East Hill, and then they started going around and taking pictures, and they were showing me plumbing pipes and stacks that are sticking out of like places that they shouldn't be, right? Because those drawings do not match what's actually on property. So I've got sewer pipes coming out of hallways and things wildly misplaced and things that I've had to open up now on the slab for my new contractor that now has to go back in and fill enough, concrete that I've got to get another slab inspection out because the compromising of the concrete, quite frankly. So, I mean, we're talking about some wild misses here based on how this is built.
I do believe that y'all also have all of the text messages. When we received pictures of what was built, because it was not what we were expecting, I questioned Lee Hunter. Lee Hunter then came back and basically gave some sort of excuse about the property line or something, which didn't make sense because it still didn't match up to the house, and the house was already there and existing. It was just, I wish I could show y'all pictures, but it was jutted in about 2 feet on that side. So none of it made sense. I mean, it sounds like...
No, you mentioned the driveway. The driveway,
yeah,
the driveway apparently was messing up his ability to make his slab correct. But in hindsight, it probably looks like the slab was just mispoured, and then you're coming up with the easiest explanation of why it was mispoured.
And obviously never went back to the city to correct the plans that were approved per permit.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the computer screen is showing a 12 by 32 area, which is like 384 point something square feet. But what was there was a 20 by 22, I'm hearing.
No. Once again, 3 things we're talking about here. This was all messed up, right? So we wanted a 22 by 20. What was built was 20 by 18. What was approved by the city was something wildly bigger.
32 by 18 or something along those lines.
So the square footage, what I'm saying, it seems like the square footage is close to the same, the dimensions are off. Is that what I'm?
I don't think the square footage is anywhere near the same.
20 by 18 is 360 square feet. A 12 by 32 is 384 square feet. So it's 24 square feet different. But again, what the expectations of a contract, that's really what we would have to go by. And the plans say 12 by 32. Is that correct, Mr. Joy? Mr. Rain, is that?
12 by 32 is what was approved?
So I'm trying to look at who was the one that sent this to us. What was the name of that?
I don't know, I'm trying to listen. Are you looking at a document that's from the city of Pensacola that basically approved that master addition?
We're looking at the plans, page 7, slab plan.
There we go. Now I
Yeah,
can see.
yes, exactly.
Which is 12 by 32.
Okay, and just to be clear here, like, our house is not, 32 feet wide. I think they took a dimension of a mother-in-law suite that's sitting in the back of that property that is this exact dimensions here. And this all sounds ridiculous after the fact, because we're over here in, New Orleans area. If we were there and not doing other projects, I would have sat there and been like, okay, this is wrong. Like, I don't know what this was that got, submitted to the city, and it's certainly not what was in the original contract of 22 by 20. And if you go out to the house, I've got 2 feet that it's not, it's not flush by on the back of this house. I mean, I don't know what builder is doing that.
Ms. Jennifer, can you go to the next page just to see if it shows attached to? I'm looking for where it would attach. See that it shows the floor plan 32 by 12. And it appears it's going to the existing house. Mr. Randy, you're the drawer.
Yeah.
It
Well, that's
appears.
what it says, but the existing house is not that wide at all. So none of it makes sense.
So who drew the plans?
Good question.
No, I mean, and I asked the engineer this question. He's like, I don't know.
Leslie
I'm just giving what was
Simpson.
given by Lee Hunter.
Who's Leslie Simpson?
That's a New Orleans. That's a New Orleans telephone number.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's not. That's like a Tennessee one or something. So it's not us. It's not our area. It's someone he used somewhere else.
Okay.
And again, these drawings were also never approved by us. We never saw them. We kind of trusted Lee Hunter to send exactly what we were looking for and what we were trying to do. And there were so many delays that once it finally got approved by the city, we just moved forward with it. It wasn't like
I think what really
he
bothered me
provided
on
it.
like the last time we talked on this call, because we were actually in transit and I couldn't really think or have my wife sitting here next to me, but we're getting questioned why we terminated someone within 2 weeks. And really the text chain, which was voluminous, really is one that says, hey, we're sorry your wife is sick, which is really not even like part of this argument, right? So we are trying to work around the contractor who apparently does like very little work for 6 months. And that little text chain would actually show you that. And it got to a point where we're like, whoa, wait a second. Now, not only are we not getting work done, we're also building things completely wrong. And I have a whole list of bullet points from my new contractor of what was done incorrectly on this addition. Irregardless of the fact that it was built the incorrect dimensions, it is also built poorly, that we're having to reframe and redo a whole bunch of work in the concrete slab. And I don't like the last time I got on the call where it's like, oh, they just decided to fire him because he didn't have a chance to do the remedy of the work. But in actuality, he was told multiple times, we are losing our patience here. And you saying, oh, the wife is sick only proves that my wife and I are trying to be nice and good people. So I don't really like the narrative.
Excuse me, do we have a copy of the actual contract?
Thank you. That's what I was trying to.
There's
So-
just a proposal. I think Jen's pulling that up.
Yeah, so we have a proposal, not an actual, what you would term as a contract.
It's an estimate.
Is there a contract?
We do not have an actual contract
Can you
provided to us.
go to page 2, please? Add 20 by 22 addition to the back of the house.
Bingo.
Which is exactly what it was supposed to be. That's what we expected. That was the width of the house. All of that made sense.
Mr. and Ms. Kendrick, did you actually have a signed contract with this? Did you?
I mean, no, this is what we had to submit to our bank. And the bank based all of their numbers off of this. I mean, they didn't ask for one. Lee Hunter never provided us one. But I mean, I don't know if that matters, being that all of it was verbally agreed on by every party.
And collecting draws based
And
upon
collecting
it.
draws based on it.
This would be does the signature overrank the actual application of it?
Any further? You want to hear from, you got some?
I have a question for the owners, the complainants. So the agreement or this proposal was based on, verbiage only, you never saw a drawing of what was gonna be added to your house?
No, not until after we basically fired him
Okay.
and we were trying to gather the information. It took a lot of work on our part just to try to figure out what all was going on.
All right, thank
And
you.
like when we terminated him, guys, like we tried to call him excessively when we were in town. 'Cause
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear from the, Mr. Hunter, please, if we can.
Okay. Any further questions of the Kendricks? Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Hunter, would you come up, please?
Wade Hunter, 9927 Oak Haven Road, Pensacola, Florida, 32526.
Go ahead, Roger.
Oak Haven, Oakhaven.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions. I was curious. I haven't heard from Mr. Hunter since
Okay.
he started. If he has something to add.
So the addition, which Ms. Reber has all the communications, I told him was being shrunk, as in we're making it more narrow because the driveway was in the way. And his response was, "That's fine. You're the professional. We trust you." As far as the plans being the wrong size, they were the wrong size that we learned after the fact. But I was gonna have the architect draw them the correct size. I didn't really get the chance to before I was terminated.
Question is, what size addition did you construct for the, well, I know you did the foundation, is that correct?
Yeah, the foundation's correct, yeah.
How big was it?
It's, I want to say it was 18 by 20.
Okay.
I'd have to check.
On your estimate, which you provided them, you have added a 20 by 22 addition.
Correct. It got more narrow because the driveway was in the way, so it didn't meet the back of the house. We cut it in a little bit to fit the driveway back. And he was aware of that. I made him aware of that. It's in the text communications that Melissa has.
Until after it was built.
Ms. Kendrick,
By the way.
we can't have people cutting in because the court reporter's trying to keep up with everybody.
Okay, sorry.
That communication Melissa has and all the text that was sent to her.
So the only written communication is a text message. There's nothing else written. There's no email or any documentation that you had to do this yet.
No, it was just text.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
point. In reviewing this file, it's a pretty large file. From what I can tell, the drawings, I don't know who provided these drawings that are backup information, but they're not even, I don't think they're relative to the case. If it's not what the owner agreed to and it's not what's constructed in the field or permitted. That part of it's really confusing to me, is why it's in the case file.
It's in the case file because that's what was provided to the city and permitted in the city.
Thanks.
Who requested the drawings?
Lee Hunter did.
Well, for them to get into our file, that was the original documentation that the building official submitted.
I understand, but somebody had to request those drawings.
When we do our investigation, we request documentation in relation to the project.
Understand, but who produced the drawings?
The building official, he sent those to me
Okay.
in an email along with pretty much the same statement that he submitted yesterday.
Mr. Chair, that would have probably been required for permitting to get the job started, the plans.
Okay. So the city produced the drawings.
No, sir, the contractor would have
Did
helped.
you do that?
An architect out of, Leslie did, out of Tampa. So he goes on he lives in Tampa, so he doesn't look at everything. He looks at an aerial view, sky view, and draws.
Anybody have any more questions?
Yeah, I I just wanted to point out that we did not know about the size of the addition until after it was already poured and built. And Lee Hunter said absolutely nothing to us. We ended up getting some pictures from a friend of ours that lives close by. They asked us why it was built smaller. So obviously then we went back to Lee Hunter to question why it was built smaller. I would also say, you know, he gave us an excuse, a reason, but he never communicated that with us before the fact for us to approve it. Also, there was probably about 2 months in there from the time that was poured and everything was being built to when he was fired, with very little communication or response from him.
Mr. Chair, the complaint is listed as Code Section 18-37D9H, failure to supervise construction activities. What I'm hearing, from what I'm hearing, is not necessarily failure to supervise as much as there's discrepancy between the owner and the contractor, but I don't necessarily see
Violation.
a violation of not supervising, just from what I can hear and see here.
And this was a job that I came out of pocket. I never took no money from these people up front. I paid everything as far as digging the footers, all the material, the rewire of the inside of the house. They say that months went by and no work got done, but the house was rewired. The house had new windows, new siding. The addition, the footers were dug, poured, framed. So why they're saying there was months that went by. I had, like I said last time, there was a banking app that was used that, you know, I had to go to the site, take pictures. I would send it to the banking app. They would then send it to the owner who would approve the funding after, I've already came out of pocket to pay for everything. So them saying that months went by and nothing was done, we had guys there every week doing work.
Incorrect. I've got my new contractor lives across the street. He can validate if you want to go ahead and continue this to another week, and I'll have him come in and he can, like, tell you the storyline. But I have like 15 bullets here of bad work that was done on this property. Not to mention these windows, for instance. There were like 19 or 18 of them. I only have 9 of them. So I don't know where the rest are. So was some work done? Yes, some work was done, and he was paid handsomely for it. So that's not the storyline today, that Lee Hunter came out of pocket and is like sitting here like the poor pauper. Like, he was paid well, and there's things missing, and there's things that have to be redone.
So I think that's the bigger issue. Lee Hunter collected on this. He may have paid up front for some things or paid contractors, but he collected draws on our money, and he's been overly paid for work that he did not do. He claimed he did 100% of the framing, which was incorrect. He claimed he did 100% of 18 windows. We received 9. We also still have window holes with no windows on 2, I believe it's 2 of our windows. Electric, he took 50% of the draw, but the rough-in electric was never even completed. We have no panel breakers, no exterior panel. There were no electric inspections. So the percentage is more what's in question.
Thank you very much. We have to proceed. As it's been noted, this is primarily a dispute between the contractor and the homeowners. We can't find any evidence of a code or statute violation. That's what we have to deal with. I'll entertain a motion of the board.
Mr. Chair, I have to make a motion to dismiss the probable cause.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Being none, the motion to dismiss this probable cause hearing is approved.
Thank you.
All right, Sunshine. I don't think we're wrong.
I have to bring the presentation back up just a moment.
We have to sign our life away.
We already did that.
When we signed up.
When we signed up, we signed our life away.
Before we get started on the presentation, I just want to, what I handed out to the board is the Form 8B. We like to cover this with you. You are one of the appointed officers, and so we want to make sure that you have an understanding, and by putting it in your hands, it kind of helps you to be able to read through it to see if you have questions. So this is, if you were to have a conflict as a public officer, and those conflicts can be, if you look in that first one, the instructions for compliance with section 1123143. A person holding elective or appointed county, municipal, or other local public office must abstain from voting on a measure which would inure to his or her special gain or loss. And then there's the very next sentence there explains what that means as far as you have to abstain from knowingly voting on a measure which would inure to the special gain or loss of a principal other than a government agency. And then it also goes on to explain to the special gain or loss of a relative or to the special private gain or loss of a business associate. I bring it to your attention. I know we have not run into this in a little while. So I just wanted to make you aware of it again. Make sure you're aware that although as an appointed officer you would have to abstain from voting on an issue where you might have one of those situations come up, you are not restricted from being able to be involved in the discussion. You just have to make sure you fill out the form. We make sure the public is aware of any interest that you may have and any attempts that you may have had to influence the decision prior to the meeting or during the meeting. It just has to be made public. So that's why I want to make sure you had this form in case you can absolutely participate in discussions. Just make sure that we have a form and the public knows what's happening. So that's a good lead-in to what's going on with the Sunshine Law. Because the public has a right to know why you make the decisions you make. And you, as you're aware, I know we've talked about it before, we don't talk off mic during a board meeting. We don't talk outside of this room. We don't go to the parking lot. We don't go to the coffee shop. We don't talk about the things that happen in here. And we don't talk back and forth through a third agent like the press. Any decisions that are made in this room. Any discussions happen in front of the people of Escambia County and the Florida public. So, moving on to Sunshine Law. I know that a lot of you remember this discussion about the Pork Chop Gang from last time. Pork Chop Gang was the 20 legislatures in rural North Florida that basically ran the state despite the fact that the state wasn't properly apportioned until 1967. So leading up to that, up to 1967, Dade County had 20% of the population and only had one representative in the House, in the legislature in the state of Florida. So the rural individuals that ran the state, basically from North Florida, they used that to control basically everything that happened in the state. And they did it all off the record. There were deals that went down. One of the new ones that I stumbled across today was I-75. There was a road board that was put together, and their job was to lay out the properties that would be involved in the Interstate 75. So what was happening is there was backdoor deals where individuals were being told where to buy property, where to buy tracts of land before I-75 land was purchased. So there was individuals that were getting wealthy off of this upcoming I-75 interstate. So that's a new one. I know we've talked in the past about the gambling game, about the poker game that happened at a camp where John Pennekamp was able to secure the funds he needed to buy the Everglades. He was part, actually, a larger board that was working to secure the Everglades and preserve the Everglades. He was part of a larger board that was working on that and happened to land himself in a poker game with a lot of legislative officials from the Pork Chop gang, and they told him, as he kept winning and taking money out of their pockets, tell us how much you need so you'll quit taking our money. And so he gave him a number. It passed through the legislature, and now he donated. He gave the money to the federal, the national park system, and the Everglades were purchased, and now it's all protected. But that all came out of this pork chop game and these backdoor deals where the public wasn't being made aware of what was happening. In 1967, Red Cross, Red Cross was very accomplished in the state of Florida, held many positions, including a judge, but he was a representative. And he had gotten a bee in his bonnet about this public record issue. And he kept pushing it, and it kept not happening. And he felt, from meetings with the press and different organizations, this was the most important thing. And in his life, he felt this is the most important job he ever did, the most important legislature he ever pushed through. And it wasn't until 1967 when the Supreme Court said you must reapportion, there must be equal representation. We also had a constitutional amendment at the time. And in 1967, he was able to push through the public records law as we know it mostly today. There's about 1,000 exceptions that have gone through since then, but he was able to push through that public records law to make sure the public was aware of what their government was doing. So originally we had, in 1909, there was a public records law, but it didn't have any teeth, and it had been interpreted to only talk, it had been interpreted by the courts to not really give it any power. Then in 1967, when Florida Statute 286-011 was passed, that's our government and the Sunshine Law. It's now known as now we have 119. This was so important to the people. The public information is so important to the people of the state of Florida that we became the first state to ever put it in our Constitution. And in 1992, the people of the state of Florida voted, this is important. We want it in our Constitution. We're the first state in the country to do that. So, what does it mean? For us, in the Sunshine Law, this is beyond public record, this is Sunshine Law. For Sunshine Law, it means meetings must be held open to the public, there has to be notice, and the minutes have to be taken and promptly recorded. And we go through that step. When you're sitting here and you have Matthews saying, Madam Clerk, has this been done? Has this been done? Has this been done? Do we approve the minutes? That's those 3 items right there. That's what he's doing. He is satisfying the law every time he does that. So it's not just a thing that happens. It's important. It's the law, and he's following the law every time he goes through that series of questions. And that's why it's so important. And he's very glad that he's doing that. So whenever you hear all those questions, understand it's just not a preliminary matter. So the next one is all meetings of any board or commission of any state agency or authority, or any agency or authority of any county, municipal, corporation, or political subdivision. In 1974, the law was amended to extend this to committees. That's why that's part of the reason that it's extended to everyone, and we do it here because it's the law. And John does a great job of making sure we stay on track with that. So then you also have the board or commission must provide reasonable notice of all such meetings. So you can't just announce something and say, we're going to do a meeting tomorrow. We're going to do a meeting this afternoon. We have to get notice out to the public. They have a right to be heard. You are their officials. They put their trust in our government. They put the trust in the local government, and we have to make sure that the local government and its committees and its boards are answering to those people. So we have to give them a chance to be present. That's why we publish it. That's why Jennifer makes sure it goes out publishing. That's why she makes sure that if we don't have something on there, she's reaching out and making the communications that need to be made so that the items can get on that agenda. This board does, and you're so fortunate to have Jennifer. She does such a great job at getting that agenda together. It's a lot of work. It may just look like a piece of paper, but it's a lot of work. There's a lot of investigative documents that have to go behind that. And yet again, all that has to be made public record so the public can come in and comment on it. I really like working with this Contractor Competency Board. I think you do a great job and you have a great clerk. So the minutes of a meeting of any such board or commission of any such state agency or authority shall be promptly recorded, and such records shall be open to the public and to public inspection. We're fortunate to have a court reporter here that handles that for us, so that when it comes up in the next meeting, the minutes are approved, they've been typed up. It makes it easy for the residents of Florida and Escambia County to look it up and be able to refer back to it. It also helps you as we go forward. If you think about it, you do probable cause hearings, and subsequently you also have to do disciplinary hearings. But because you have such a good record, you have something that you can go back and look at, and also the public knows what you're going back to look at because it becomes part of our new record. So I can't commend you enough for what a great job you do. In 2013, 286-0114 was passed, which gave the reasonable opportunity to be heard. So we didn't have people come in today.
That's a public forum.
That's our public forum. And just because we have public forum doesn't mean that there's not rules that can control that. And you hear Jennifer read those rules at the beginning about the rules that must be followed. I'm going to give some people a minute to clear the hallway.
It's the police.
If you watched BOCC meetings, you're familiar with the public forum that usually occurs for about an hour and a half prior to the actual board meeting occurring. And that's where the public has an opportunity to come forward and tell their county commissioners their concerns. And I know that and it's not always something that has to do with the business that's going to be at hand that day. Sometimes it's just an opportunity for people to come and talk and put things forward out there that may not be related to any business that's going on. And there's no restriction as long as they follow the rules and keep it a proper forum and things don't get out of hand with name calling and telephones. Yes, sir.
Got a question?
Oh, no.
Because we make the statement at the public forum, they cannot address any subject that's on the agenda. This seems to say any proposition before the board they can comment on.
Right. So what we do is we allow them to come fill out the forms, right? And then if they're going to be a witness, if they're going to have testimony, then we push them off.
But we tell them in the public that when they come before for a public forum, they cannot comment on anything on the agenda.
Is that in our rules?
That's what we tell them?
Typically says that, yeah.
Okay.
Because if it's an agenda item, they want them to speak during that item.
Then they have to come up and address that they're going to speak on that agenda item, not in the general public comments.
Yeah, but I think this is saying as long as they have an opportunity to speak, if they're going to speak on something in the subject matter, they're going to speak at that time.
I just want to make
not
sure
public forum.
I'm
So-
correct when I say when they come up for public forum.
Right. Now this
It's on
is,
any subject that's not on the agenda.
let's draw the distinction. We're talking a different thing between public forum, and this is to be heard on the proposition.
That's
So
right.
if they're just here on the public forum, that's wide open and that's anything. But you couldn't come up during the proposition while it's being discussed and talk about anything off the shelf.
That's right.
So what this draws the distinction is, if it's a proposition before you, you can certainly lay out the time that discussion occurs. Is that your question? You're okay in laying out the time that the discussion on the proposition occurs.
Yeah.
As far as public
All
forum.
I'm saying is during when we say public forum, they can't address an agenda item. They can be asked to make a comment during the actual discussion of the item.
That's typically procedural.
Yeah.
You, as the board, and
I'm just
historically, you've
making
said.
sure.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
You're okay.
All right.
As long as they have the opportunity to be heard as far as laying out the time.
Yeah.
Public forum could be at any time. It doesn't have, But if they're talking about the proposition, it is fine to lay it out at the time that the proposition is being
But I
discussed.
tried to address it, particularly at a public forum. It's not an item on the agenda, but that doesn't exclude you from talking about an item on the agenda at some appropriate time, not the public forum.
Right, because public forum is not really when the board considers something and
That's
asks
right, that's
questions
right.
and weighs it in light of all the others. So it makes more sense, public forum allow,
I know. I'm just
I
trying
have a
to-
lot of examples running through my
I'm
head.
trying to get the wording down right properly.
so, yes, you're in good shape.
Okay.
Okay. And then, so as to the opportunity to be heard, you can see there where it says it need not occur at the same setting of official action. Doesn't have to occur during the, it has to be done during the decision-making process. But and it has to be reasonable proximity and time before official action. But it doesn't prohibit orderly conduct or proper decorum. So those are the discussions. So that I think that one goes more to what your question. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the same setting at the official action, but they do have to have the opportunity to be heard on it.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have. You can restrict it from public forum because public forum can be a wide open discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we talked about there's other exceptions that don't allow the opportunity to be heard. That's emergencies affecting public health, and we're well aware of how things happen during emergencies in Escambia County in the state of Florida with hurricanes and tornadoes and fires and floods. We have to be able to make decisions quickly, and sometimes that doesn't allow for delay. We talked about ministerial acts. You've seen the Board of County Commissioner, where they do ceremonial proclamations. They recognize the attorney, they recognize the employee of the month, the employee of the year, different organizations. There's a list of exempt meetings, and then also during quasi-judicial. So whenever you're doing your probable cause hearings, whenever you're doing your disciplinary hearings, those are quasi-judicial hearings.
Yeah.
And so there's restrictions on those that you can't just come up and talk. You have to be related to the
Blab your mouth.
case. You have to be related to the case. And then finally, the penalties for not doing things in the sunshine. There's a civil infraction for $500 with intent. There's a second-degree misdemeanor, suspension, removal, and you can also be required to pay attorney's fees. Any more questions?
No.
I'm trying to get you some new material every time I come. I thought that was interesting.
Well, you
about
do a pretty good
I-75.
job of it.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Being no further business before this board,
I'd like to just make a statement. A couple weeks ago, I was in Orlando, some committee meetings, and the secretary of the DBPR, Melanie Griffith, was in this small meeting, and they're over the CILB, construction industry, and I mentioned about the time frame it takes from us to get to them and all that. State license guys keep going and
Yeah.
can move through the state, and they have become aware of it, and they're got a task force that they're putting on that. Just
Good.
FYI, things like that.
sounds good to me. Being no further business, we're adjourned.
I don't have to talk.